What's up, y'all? Thanks so much for clicking on the video. My name is Leah, and let's recap and review Real Housewives of Potomac. This is season 10, episode 18, part 1 of the reunion. And I actually enjoyed it. And I was surprised. I'm not even gonna lie. I felt like don't get too invested into the trailer and into what people are saying, like, the rumors or the, people giving tea about what we're supposed to expect. Because I'm like, girl, watch me watch this and it ain't given. But I really enjoyed the first part of the reunion. I said, okay. I like what we doing here. Okay. So let's get into this review. Well, y'all know sometimes before we get in to the review, we get a little spicy just a little bit. And I only have two clips that I want to play for you guys, but I also want to let you know that I did two spicy corners, okay? One is older because it was during the off season. Well, I didn't even know you call it the off season. During the hiatus because of the Super Bowl. I'll put the thumbnail on the screen. The link will be in the description box below. The other one, I think I posted it on Saturday or maybe Friday. Either way, it's newer. It's about Karen, Robyn's thoughts on Karen and her one-on-one sit down with Andy. The thumbnail will be on the screen and the link will be in the description box below. So there's that. Now let's move over to the new information. So the first thing I want to play for you guys is Gizelle. So I don't know where Gizelle was going, y'all, or like I don't know where she was going, but pretty much TMZ caught Gizelle on the side of a sidewalk in New York, okay, and they asked Gizelle about Wendy. So it says this: Gizelle Bryant tells TMZ that Dr. Wendy Osefu should take a plea deal if offered for definitely. Do you agree? And this is coming from No Chaser TV. So let me play that clip for you.
So the suit is suiting. Quickly, we gotta ask you.
Yes.
I know Karen said, she didn't take that plea deal. So the fans are like, wait a minute, Wendy, you better take a plea deal if they ask you, girl.
She should.
Is that kind of like a forewarning to Wendy? Like, girl, take that plea deal if they're gonna offer it to you.
Yes.
I know we all don't know, we're all just waiting, but is that like kind of like a telltale sign? Like maybe you should take a plea deal if they offer it.
I'm sure she should.
Maybe
Not
let's
maybe.
time or no.
For definitely.
For definitely. Definitely. Well, you look fantastic.
So, I don't think Gizelle said anything wrong. I did see some people who were upset with what she said. I think it's mainly because they felt like Gizelle was poking fun at Wendy or being shady. But I think a lot of us who are either have read the articles, seen the videos, all kind of have the same feeling that if there's an opportunity for Wendy and Eddie to take a plea deal and they miss out on spending 15 years in jail or prison, then I think everyone is like, yeah, do that. Definitely do that. But I have seen people online who are saying that they are lawyers, stating that Wendy and Eddie should not take a plea deal if that plea deal does not reduce some of their severe charges, because agreeing to the plea deal automatically you're showing that you're admitting that you did some of the things that they're saying that you did. And one of the lawyers I remember reading saying that like that could really like dismantle their lives. Like it's pretty much saying like, girl, you might as well just go to jail because it's going to be hell in jail, like in the free world, if you do a plea deal and it doesn't reduce certain charges. I don't know. I don't want Wendy and Eddie going to jail. I know a lot of people don't feel bad for them because A, they either don't like them and feel like this is what they deserve, or B, it's just like the consequences of your actions. But even so, I still don't want them to go to jail. I really am not that like, oh my God, about them scamming the insurance company, because the insurance company scams us daily. Won't even cover certain things, but I'm paying you hundreds of dollars. So it's just like, I don't care. But I do understand the consequences of your own actions, and you have to suffer the consequences of poor decisions. I just hate that they did this, if it is true that they really did do this, and it's looking like they did, and it's just like, dang. Mm-mm-mm-mm. And I'm hoping for the best for them, but I'm won't be surprised if the worst happens, okay? But the last thing I want to talk to you guys about, and then we'll get into this review, is it looks like Greg and Kiarna are on this like tropical vacation. A picture was posted by Jay's reality blog, but then all of a sudden a video came out of Kiarna. It seems like maybe she was at one of the resort bars, and she was trying to set the record straight about her relationship with Angel, because we're going to talk about the way you were speaking to her. But let me play that clip for you guys.
I really try not to comment on the things that people have to say about the reunions, about this and that. But y'all have to stop when it comes to people in their relationships. You do not know what kind of friendships I have with my friends. You do not know our thoughts. You do not know the conversations that we have. Like, stop it. You guys are so used to this, like, fake personas and yes people. I don't get down with my friends like that, and I never will. So, rep this whole thing that, you know, I want to control my friends and all of that. Y'all, please. Everyone on this show is some grown-ass women. There's no need for me to do any of that. Like, just stop that anyway.
Kiarna could have kept this. I know it's hard not to respond to negative comments or critiques about your behavior, even with my platform being as small as it is. When I get negative comments, depending on how I'm feeling that day, I might respond, I might not respond. I might block you or delete the comment. It's my page, I do what I want. But I know it's hard not to respond to those things. But my thing about it is, like, Kiarna's on a vacation. Like, girl, you're in a tropical place. It looks like maybe you might be in a Spanish area or like in the Caribbeans. Go to the beach, get you some more tequila shots, you know, and bask in that. You've already filmed the reunion. There's no reason to get upset about what people are saying. And I know that's hard. I really do. Like, I don't think she's wrong for saying something, but it's like, you're not making the situation better. And I can tell that Kiarna is struggling with the fact that when she was first introduced to us, we all liked her. I know I did. You know, I thought she was pretty. Still think she's pretty. She's beautiful. Kiarna is gorgeous. But like, I was like, oh my gosh, she's pretty. She's relatively young. She got her own money. She has her own business. Like, she just seemed like, oh my gosh, like, she cool. Like, I really do like her. But then we get full-time Kiarna, and it's like, oh, this is kind of a drag. You're a drag. And I think she overcorrected with everyone saying she was boring during season 9, and then she came into season 10 on 10, and she didn't find the happy medium, and we need to find the happy medium, girl. You do. Do I think they're gonna get rid of her? I don't know. Since Karen is coming back, and we know Wendy more than likely is coming back. We know Giselle is coming back. I hope they either get rid of Ashley or demote her. Angel potentially may be coming back. I definitely could see Tia coming back. I'm not sure about Kiarna. I think Jassi will come back as a friend of as well. I'm not sure. But I just feel like if Kiarna does come back, girl, you got to lighten up a little bit. And you also need to find your happy medium. But let's get into this. All right, y'all. So let's get into this review. But before we get into the review, happy Chinese New Year, happy Mardi Gras, happy New Moon, happy solar eclipse, happy Ramadan. It's a lot going on today because it's February the 17th. But if you celebrate any of those things that I have just mentioned, happy all of that stuff, all right? I know for the new year, for the Chinese New Year's, it's the year of the fire horse, meaning that it's supposed to be a year of like forward momentum, freedom, and like energy, but it's not specific on the type of energy. So, you know, choose wisely when you're making decisions. But yeah, happy all those things, all right? So let's get into this review. So the episode opens up and we get this montage of Wendy. You have the year 2020, that was Wendy's first season, that was season 5, and everybody met Wendy at Candace's anniversary party. Then we have Wendy and Ashley getting into it at Monique's lake house when Wendy told Ashley, you referred to me as Dr. Wendy. Then 2021, you know, oh girl redid the body. We got new titties, a nice snatched waist. Then 2024, we have Wendy's 40th birthday and that lavish party that she threw for herself and her screaming. And then at the White House, then we have her at Lake Norman with the ladies talking about how she never thought people would celebrate her. And she said this year at 40, she realizes that she is enough. So then the screen goes black and now it's October the 9th, 2025. Girl. And then they flash across the screen Eddie and Wendy's mugshots with this headline saying, RHOP's Wendy Osefu and husband Eddie arrested on multiple fraud charges. I said, my God, on today. Okay. So then we find out that they picked cameras right back up a week after the arrest. So now it's October the 16th, 2025. So we see Wendy and Eddie in their house. Wendy, I'm not gonna lie, the baby voice was killing me, but I can tell that she's been crying a lot because she looks drained. Like in the face, you see her, she looks very tired. And I can tell she's probably been riddled with anxiety and just in full on tears. Okay. So they walk into the newly renovated den, and she's talking about how she feels like she's in a constant nightmare. She says the house doesn't even feel like her house anymore. And I said, girl, I believe you, girl. When the police show up, it wouldn't feel that way anymore to me either. Then she goes on to say that like she needs to eat, but she doesn't feel hungry. She was like, I just don't have an appetite, but I know I need to eat. So then Eddie ends up saying, man, it's been a week. Like, it has been a week since all of this has happened. And Wendy ends up saying it doesn't even feel like it's real. And then Eddie says he thought it was a prank. So then Wendy says in her wildest dreams, she never thought this would like happen to them. Then she goes on saying that it feels like a bad dream, and she's like trying not to cry, but then she starts like crying anyway, because then Eddie brings up their daughter Cameron. So before, or I mean, I guess they might have been tipped off before the police came to the house, or maybe they anticipated, I'm not sure, but the kids weren't home. So Wendy was able to call her mom and her sister to pick up the kids, and in doing so, Eddie was like, when he called the checkup on them, he could hear Cameron's voice in the background, and Eddie just starts crying as well. Wendy starts crying, and she's like, she's so innocent. And Wendy was like, she has no idea what's going on. She just seems so happy to just hear my voice. And then Wendy was like, I told her everything's okay. And Cameron's like, okay, like, I'll see you tomorrow, mommy. And Wendy's just was like, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to see her tomorrow. And so they're both crying, both worried about their kids. And then Wendy says she's so scared. She was like, I'm just scared for them and for us. So then she ends up saying, like, what do you think this is going to do to our marriage? Like, how is this going to affect our marriage? And Eddie's like, it's definitely going to impact it. And then Wendy says, I'm not the same person anymore. And I hope you're okay. Or I hope you're okay with that I'm not the same. And he's like, yeah, we gonna get through it. Like, God got us. He got us 15 years. He got us right now. I said, I hope he do. I hope he do. It has been 3 months since Wendy and Eddie got arrested. And now it's time for the reunion. We have everybody showing up in New York. We actually see Ashley walk past Karen's dressing room as she's trying to get to her dressing room. And she's wondering, you know, is Karen here? Like, is she here? And they're like, girl, no, it's too early. And so Ashley's like, oh, okay. So then we see, Ashley go to Giselle's dressing room while she's getting her makeup done, and they're both wondering if Wendy's coming, and if she is coming, they're like, what type of energy is she going to give us? So then Giselle's like, she can't wait for Wendy's State of the Union address, and then Ashley was like, if I was her, I would come dressed like a nun. We then have this scene of Wendy getting out of her Uber black car. Mind you, it's dark. It is dark outside. She's dressed in all white, and even I know she looks good. So if you only imagine the outfit when it's daylight, oh, I know she was clean. I said, okay, girl, I see you. So then it's time for everyone to get on stage, okay? Girl, when I tell you this scene tickled the piss out of me, because Giselle gets on stage. Andy's like, oh, you'll be sitting next to Wendy. And Giselle's like, what do you want me to do? Hold her hand? And then Andy ends up saying, no, you can do whatever you're comfortable with, but you're going to be sitting right there. And I said, oh my gosh, like Giselle really thought she was going to be first chair. I know she felt rejected the same way a lot of people do, including myself. If you like wave to somebody and they don't wave back, or they just ignore you and you're just like, oh my God, like what did I do to you? You could see it in Giselle's face, even with the side profile, that she was like, y'all really about to put me like, right? Really? And I said, ooh, girl, take your seat. What was crazy to me is like, I've always been under the impression, or I've always thought that when it came to the reunion seating chart, the women knew like either the day, like ahead of time, like they would either figure it out like the day before or 2 days before the reunion, or even before they get on stage. But the fact that they don't know until they get on stage, wild. Like, that's actually really wild to me, because that's basically like a grade for you that entire season. Like, we already know, like, first chair is an A, second B, third C, fourth can be a D or a F. And I'm just like, ooh, Giselle, like you really thought you did enough to get that first chair. And I'm like, Giselle, you this season were mediocre. You honestly should be third chair. But the only reason you're getting the second chair is because of seniority. You and Ashley should be Ashley should be sitting where Angel is, which is fourth chair. A D, girl. Because your performance this season was subpar, Ashley Darby. But it's just like, wow. Like, you really thought she was going to be first chair, girl. Oh, my goodness. I know she was upset. Because you could tell it in her body language. Mind you, Giselle's dress looks way better in motion. Like, she needs to learn better angles when it comes to posing, because hers, like, standing next to Eddie, and when she sat down, I said, oh, this is not really, like, I don't like the dress, but it's not really a bad dress. And I actually think her hair looks way better than what we got in that picture. I said, girl, you got to learn how to, like, to the side, girl. You got to do better. You got to do better, Giselle. So we then see Stacey and Ashley get on stage. Ashley and Stacey kind of have like a light back and forth with each other, because Andy ends up saying, oh, this is a beautiful dress you have on, Stacey. And Stacey's like, it's made by a Nigerian designer. And then Ashley ends up saying like, oh, I think the same designer designed my dress from last season's reunion. And when they did the side by side, I was like, okay, I could see it. The embellishment and the open corset top, I was like, it looks similar. And then Stacey was like, girl, I haven't even sat down yet and you already coming for me. And I said, girl, Ashley letting you know what type of time she on, so just be ready, girl. Be ready. So then everyone's wondering, where's Wendy? So Wendy is the last person to get on stage. We see her kiss Eddie as she walks onto the stage, and everyone is just like, oh my goodness. You hear Tia say, oh, I knew it. I knew you were going to wear feathers. Then you have Stacey saying, are you giving the Diana Ross vibes? Because that's what I'm getting. Wendy looked good. Like, if this is her last reunion, she looks beautiful. Even when she sat down in the chair, I said, girl, you are immaculate. Like, this might be one of my favorite reunion looks over all franchises, because I'm just like, even when you sit down, you look good, girl. I said, Paris, you did that. You did that, Paris. You did your big one, because she looks amazing. Hair, nails, everything, all right? So then Andy is like, now it's time to start the reunion. He was like, it was only 10 years ago we were introduced to the world, to this quiet little enclave called Potomac, Maryland. And then he also talks about how the stage is like rodeo theme or horse theme, because they had a lot of horse theme events. And I said, okay, cool. So then Andy ends up talking to Giselle and Ashley about them being the only two OGs, and how the show was created around a mom group. They flash back to 2016, and we see Giselle, Karen, and Charisse. And then Andy ends up saying, like, wasn't this show filmed after you guys' group? And then Giselle says, no, Charisse wasn't a part of the group. And my thing about it was, Charisse wasn't a part of the group, but she definitely got y'all all together. Just because you mad at her for coming at y'all on Carlos King doesn't mean we could rewrite history, Giselle. Also, the show was supposed to be called like Ladies Who Lunch or Ladies Who Brunch, and they wanted to mimic it after like Jack and Jill, but Jack and Jill said, don't play with us. Don't play with us. Because Charisse did let it be known on the Carlos King interview that she was the only one, her and Ashley, that were not a part of Jack and Jill. But Karen, Giselle, and the rest of the ladies were. So she was surprised by that they were trying to move the show to Jack and Jill instead of focusing on like moms and being friends. So I said, okay, that's interesting. So then Andy ended up saying, did you think that the show would be what it is now based off of like the first season? Giselle says no, but then when Ashley got on here, I knew we had something. I said, girl, why are you glazing Ashley? But okay, girl. Then they ended up asking, or Andy ended up asking, how's it been filming without Karen? And both Giselle and Ashley basically were like, it's been different. Giselle says it's been tough, and Ashley said it felt foreign. Giselle says she enjoys arguing back and forth with Karen, and not having her there, it was a letdown, So then Andy says, well, Karen will be here, and she has been watching the show. And Giselle's like, oh, yeah, I know she's been watching the show, because she, like, texts me and telling me how she feels about each episode, which is a contradiction. It's a contradiction to what Karen said about how she don't really be on that phone like that. Because now all of a sudden you watching the show and you texting people about the show. Karen be on that phone. Karen be on that phone. Before we continue on, I do want to talk about Karen briefly. I'm going to be honest. I really did not miss Karen the way that I thought I was going to miss her. Like, the way that I miss Candace on this show, I thought that's how I was going to miss Karen. Like, I want Candace to come back, like, expeditiously, immediately. But I know that's not what she wants for herself. So, you know, I'm just going to have to give up hope. But it's just kind of like, there were moments where it's like, dang, it would be nice if Karen was here, but I was never like, oh my God, Karen would make this better. Like, was this season epic or great without her? No, but it did not bomb the way that I thought it would. Like, it actually was okay to a certain degree, and it was entertaining. So I am wondering, how does Karen mesh with this group now? Because when she left, Jacqueline and Mia were around, and they're no longer here. Now we have Tia and Angel, and she did have somewhat of a relationship with the new girls, which would be Jassi, Stacey, and Kiarna, but she left on a sour note with Wendy and Stacey. And it's like, I don't know if Gizelle is really going to like stick it to Karen, or Ashley going to stick it to Karen the way that I think they want to, because of the fans and because the focus is on Wendy. But I'm also looking at Karen like, you can't really be on a high horse because you went to jail. And granted, you could give Wendy tips on like this and that, but it's like, you also didn't listen to your lawyers. So the only thing I feel like Karen could tell Wendy is listen to your lawyers, you know? And I feel like she also can't clock Stacey for lying, because Karen lied for a whole year blatantly to our faces, screaming she will be vindicated. All the while, this is her 4th DUI, and she's I was about to say a drug addict. She's an alcoholic. Well, I mean, technically, because she says she do pills. Girl. So it's just like, I'm wondering, how does Karen fit in the group now? Like, how? And that's the part that's very intriguing to me about this situation. But they continue on with this segment by talking to Angel and Tia about this being their first season, season 10, and what were their expectations. Angel, girl, I want to say this. Although I thought Angel looked really nice, she was in my top 3. Her titties look like they hurt. I thought they properly did her bust correctly. Them titties is up here. Like, they're up, like, in her throat. Angel, girl. But Angel basically says her expectation was to come to the group and make some friends. Gizelle makes a face. She says, you know, it was a rough landing and a rough process, but she had fun to a certain degree. Then Tia basically says that, you know, she moved to the DMV area during COVID, and her goal was to make friends as well. And she says she feels as though she accomplished that. Then they start talking about Stacey, and Andy is like, do you think you're experiencing the sophomore slump or the sophomore glow up? And Stacey ends up saying, I think I'm experiencing both. She says that it was a rough season, but she does appreciate the way that her and Wendy have grown and glown together. And Andy said glown. And they both were like, Andy, it's a word, look it up. And I thought that was cute. So the conversation continues on with him talking to Kiarna and telling Kiarna, like, you know, you've been holding a flute for 2 seasons. It's definitely different from being a friend of. You have to share more of your personal life. What can you tell us of how you feel now? Kiarna says her first year, she feels like she was warming up a bit. This year, she says she's having a little bit more fun with it. And I said, girl, you could have fooled me. I don't think that's what happened, Kiarna. So then they start talking to Wendy, and Andy ends up being like, how are you? She's like, I'm good. He's like, how do you feel? Like, how would you compare the Wendy now to the Wendy that, you know, first started on the show? Wendy says the Wendy that started on the show was someone who was unsure of herself. She was like, I just had given birth to Cameron. And when they flashed to her boys, I said, dang, they really were that young. Like, I don't remember them being that small compared to what we see of them now as like teenagers. And I was like, wow, they really were on this show. Like, when you can document like in like video form how people grow up, it does feel like it goes by so quickly. So she says, you know, that was my first season. And she's like, right now it feels very empowering. And I said, girl, is it? Because you looking at fraud charges, Wendy. So then Andy ends up saying, well, you're looking at some really serious things, Wendy, like you and Eddie got arrested and you're facing 16 counts of alleged fraud. What can you tell us about what's happening with your case? When I tell you, I said, girl, how is she about to answer this question? How like, because everybody was wondering how Wendy was going to maneuver at the reunion. And I'm going to say, I was actually impressed with her responses in this segment because she didn't do what I think I, myself included, and other people thought, where it was going to be like, well, I can't speak about that. I'm in active litigation, or my lawyer told me not to speak about that. She took it a different angle, which still gave us some information, and it was new information. So then it's like, okay, she told us something. Compared to if you look at how Erica Jane was maneuvering, Jen Shaw was maneuvering, even Karen, it's like you didn't really give us anything other than very like chat GPT answers. And it's like, well, we want a little bit more. And I just want more information. And I feel like Wendy gave us that without implicating herself or getting herself in even more trouble. So pretty much she talks about how she can tell Andy that she is in an active investigation, that she's made several appearances in court, and this has been a trying time for her and her family. One thing I will say in this segment was Kiarna was getting on my nerves. Like, the constant moving around, every time Wendy says something, she making a face. The same thing with Stacey. And I wonder, what is Kiarna? Is she an Aries? Is she a Scorpio? Because she gives very much like, if she likes you, she likes you. But if she doesn't like you, it is very hard for her to hide her disdain for you. And I think she feels very much vindicated with Wendy and Eddie getting caught up this way because she feels like Wendy is fake and phony. But I'm just like, girl, you could have a better poker face, because honestly, you don't have a real reason to beef with Wendy. You don't, Kiarna, and you know you don't. That's why you let it go real quickly with her. But you still haven't let go what you have with Stacey, because you don't have a real reason not to like Stacey. But it is what it is. It gives very much follower energy with Kiarna. So the conversation continues on, and I think Andy ends up asking Wendy, like, how are your kids with all of this? And Wendy basically says that, like, it varies from kid to kid. Like, Cam doesn't really know what's going on, but then you have Carter, who is actually very much aware of what is happening. So she explains that on the day that her and Eddie got arrested, that she called her sister and her mom to come and get the kids. And she explains that she was just happy that they didn't see them getting hauled off, like, to jail. She says that Eddie woke her up from a nap, saying that the police were there, and she said, okay. Her response saying, okay, makes me believe that they knew or somebody tipped them off that the police were coming. So they were prepared and ready to send the kids away. They just didn't know what time the police were coming. So she wakes up and then they go to jail. She said Carter kind of knew something was up because they don't normally randomly just spend a night with the grandparents, like with her sister and her mom. Like, they know ahead of time. So when he got over there to her aunt's house, he opens up his phone and he actually sees all the information about what's happening with his parents. Now, some people felt like Wendy was lying about that, but I think she was actually telling the truth, because the same way when the body cam footage dropped of Karen, when them mugshots dropped, I had people who I know that, like, because I'm a part of an anime community, but they know I, like, you know, dibble and dabble, and I have a channel and I review reality TV. They was sending me the Neighborhood Talk article, or like the thing on the Neighborhood Talk or on the Shade Room, being like, girl, what is this? Is this what they talking about on the show? Girl, she going to prison. Like, everyone was asking me questions, and I was like, girl, I thought this was AI, y'all. I don't know what's going on. Like, it's too much. So I can believe that he saw it. What I feel bad about is that, like, what Wendy Sher is saying, that he found out this information while he was with his aunt and his grandmother, but did not feel comfortable enough to tell them. Like, he didn't tell them that he knew. So that means he went to bed with this information on his heart. And I could only imagine how stressful it was for him to try to get sleep. He was probably riddled with all types of anxiety and was scared because he doesn't know what's going to happen to his parents. So Wendy ends up saying that really hurt him, that he didn't tell her sister or her mom. And he went to sleep like that. So then she says the next day, Eddie and her picked up, you know, the kids, and they were going to pretend like everything was fine. But then she ends up, like, looking at her son, and she can tell that something's wrong. So she's like, baby, what's wrong? And he ends up saying, where were you? And then next thing you know, he just started crying. And Wendy says, like, I never want to lie to my kids. Kiarna makes a face. And so she was like, I just held him and we just cried together in the backseat of Eddie's car. So she says now what they do is whenever they go to court, they tell him. So whenever he sees a post or anything about it, at least he knows what's happening and he not blindsided again the way that he was the first time. So then Gizelle, I think, was trying to lighten the mood or be shady. Either way, I couldn't tell. She brings up Wendy's wig being askew. She was like, girl, so was the nap the reason why that wig was shifted that way? And Wendy ends up saying, girl, that, I know my wig was wigging, but that's my professor wig, girl. That's my professor wig. So then I think either Andy or Ashley brings up Wendy's grin, being like, what was up with that shit-eating grin you had on? And Wendy ends up saying that the guy that was taking her picture was very nice to her and was trying to get her to smile. And I believe her. The part of this story I don't believe is that her and Wendy weren't high. Her and Eddie weren't high. Because I used to watch this show that used to come on Spike TV where it would be people who were stuck in like the holding area of a police station, like getting processed. And the people there were actually really nice to these people to a certain degree. They would try to liven the mood if the charges weren't that serious. Like, it was public intoxication or like they weren't mean to these people, even though they could have been. And I don't doubt that some of them were. So her saying that the guy was like, oh no, you want to do another one? Probably was like, girl, this is going to be all over the internet. You might want to smile. But I do believe her and Eddie was high as hell. High as giraffe titties. They was high. Okay? And she was like, he kept saying, take another one. So, cause she was like, he knew the situation was heavy. Okay, so she's like, if you think I regret smiling, I don't, because I think that's what we all do. We all smile through things. So then Gizelle was like, well, did you pop a Happy Eddie? And she was like, no, I ain't pop a Happy Eddie. She said, I didn't look high. I said, girl, you did look high, Wendy. You did. And then she said the reason why Eddie looked that way is because he was sleeping in the holding cell and then they woke him up to come take a picture. So then they end up asking her, did she sleep in jail? And she's like, yes. Stacey and Gizelle were gagged. They were like, you really slept in jail? And she was like, yeah. And so I'm like, Stacey, you didn't know that? So I'm guessing Stacey hasn't really pushed the issue with Wendy, because I would have asked, like, girl, did you sleep in jail? That would have been my first question. So then Wendy talks about her time in jail, saying that she didn't know that they controlled the lights and like you really don't have any autonomy when you're in jail. She's like, they tell you when to go to sleep, when to wake up. She also explains that like she did not use the bathroom there. She was like, there was a bathroom there, but she held it. And then Andy brings up Karen's whole like pad thing where she made a pad reef, but he says tampons, and they was like, Andy, and he was like, okay, y'all know my bad, I don't use them. And it was like, you'll get a pass. So then Gizelle ends up bringing up, I remember when we talked about Karen going to jail, you were always like, dang, like Karen's really in jail. And like, here you are sitting here talking about this situation, and it seems like you're making a joke of it. And Ashley says the same thing. Like, it's kind of like you're talking about it like it's a day in the park. So then Gizelle ends up saying, are you okay? And Wendy says, no, I'm not okay. But she was like, but honestly, like what's carrying me through is my faith right now. And that's what it is. So then Ashley, because she wants to be a part of something and she knows she ain't really got nothing going on and she is trying her best to like save her job, like Whitney Darby was trying to save her job on her reunion. She ends up saying, guys, my number one fear is like going to jail. Like, that's the most terrifying thing. And Wendy looks at Gizelle like, is she really doing this? Is she really doing? Okay. You even see Stacey be like, girl. She was like, I've been in this group for 10 years and this is the second person who is like, who's gone to jail. Even Kiarna was like, Ashley. And Andy wasn't even impressed. And he was like, that's really, it's very terrifying to me. And I was like, can we move on? Can we move on? And then Andy moves on because Andy basically is like, okay, Wendy, we're going to move on. But you do know we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, okay? And I'm sorry about it. Because, yeah, Ashley, what the hell? Like, for real, girl. My thing is like your biggest fear or your number one fear is going to jail and not something happening to your children. you know, not losing a body part. You know, my biggest fear is going insane. I don't know, like something like that. Like, I just, girl, what? Ashley. So the next thing we have is Stacey's package. They talk about Stacey being featured on Vanity Fair. They run her B-reel footage. If you don't know, Stacey was featured on the 33 best performances of 2025 Vanity Fair list. And so Andy ends up asking her, how do you feel about that? She was like, I'm incredibly grateful and incredibly humbled. So as the conversation continues on, Andy ends up asking Giselle, how does she feel about Stacey being featured on the magazine? Giselle actually says something nice, which I was surprised by, and so was Stacey, because she basically says that she got tired of seeing all the negative press surrounding Potomac, with Karen going to jail and getting out of jail, and then Wendy going to jail, and she's like, no offense, Wendy, and Wendy's like, girl, it's fine. And she was like, it was nice to see something positive, so congratulations, Stacey. Stacey is like, wow, like, are the pigs flying? Are they flying? Okay. So then they start talking about, is Stacey's persona on the show a performance? Because a viewer's question was like, are you performing or is this really you? And they can kind of understand why the women kind of take issue with the way that she shows up on the show. I personally think that the women know that Stacey is performing and they're also performing, but they have a problem with the fact that Stacey's performance is garnering her so much praise. I really think that's what it is, because we don't know a lick about Giselle. We just found out last season that she had a sister because I think she was getting fibroids removed or something was happening where she was getting surgery, and we find out she has a sister. This whole Will situation with her, like, it's so much stuff about Giselle that we don't know. If you compare Giselle to like a Teresa, Nene, Vicky Gunvalson, who else? Luann, like people who are considered like OGs, even Bethany. We know so much about them, and they were on their shows either less amount of time or more amount of time than Giselle. But they gave us a lot. Even Kyle has given us a lot. She not doing it now, but she's even given us a lot. We don't know that much about Giselle. And I think the thing about it is like, you can't constantly scream someone to be authentic and give us authenticity and transparency when you don't give it yourself. Same with Ashley. Ashley's trying to rewrite history like she's some truth teller and she keep it real when, girl, you lied to us every season about you and that man being in a good space. And that prenup about you getting $20 million, that's a lie too. Okay? So the conversation continues on with Stacey basically saying that, you know, she's herself. She's always herself. Even when she was on QVC, she was being herself. And then Ashley ends up saying, but that was a performance, Stacey. And Stacey says, indeed. Basically letting me know she is performing on this show. And we know Stacey's performing. At least I knew when we met AJ. When AJ sat down with her last season and he looked at her when she brought up TJ and he was giving her very much like, girl, I know you don't even like that man. That's not even the type of man you go for. Like, what are you doing? What is this? Like, this is not the girl I know that I was running the streets of Detroit with. I knew then that Stacey was playing a character, but I really didn't care because I was entertained, you know? So Stacey ends up saying, indeed, but I think that you can see my genuine joy for being alive through my videos. You know, I feel like that runs through the TV screens and through the videos. Wendy ends up saying, yeah, I see it too. I see it. So then Tia jumps into the conversation and she talks about how it is true that Stacey isn't really being herself. She explains how they were on a plane ride coming back, I think, from one of their cash trips. I think it was Nevis. And she heard Stacey talking, but she said the voice sounded different. She said it was a completely different voice. It was deeper. Because Stacey is like, what are you talking about? And what was so different about my voice? She was like, it was a deeper voice. She goes on to say that it was not as polished as the voice that we have here. And so then Stacey's like, okay, of course you would know Miss Queen of Accents. I said, oh my God. I said, okay, Stacey. And then Tia ends up saying, I do feel like Stacey has a QVC voice, but I just thought she was looking for something to have issues with me. It's clear that I trigger you because you married up and you're trying to be something that you're not. When she said married up, the way that everybody on the couch was like, ooh, and the way that I did not think the audience was going to be pissed. Like, I should have known, but like the way that Twitter was like, Tia, what was that? I said, ooh, Tia, really back in the elitism, just a smidge, girl. Really back in just a smidge. Because they were like married up online. I said, oh my God, they about to drag Tia. Because my thing about it is, even if Stacey did marry up, girl, you clearly married down. Like, if you're supposed to be this Nigerian princess, your daddy had you on like cars upon cars, girl. It's giving very much like lower middle class or average middle class, okay? It's not giving higher, which is kind of like perplexing to me because you work for Sotheby's, and I would think the houses that y'all sell in the DMV area and in the surrounding area are houses that are worth like millions of dollars, so the commission should be nice, but it's not like you getting it. So either you not making that much money or something going on. And I said, "Ooh, Tia, this is not going to land well." And it didn't, because them people were like online. Somebody said, "How is the broke Nigerian princess going to ever tell somebody they married up?" I said, "Oh, God, not the broke Nigerian princess." So then the conversation continued on where Stacey is like, "Girl, your English accent goes in and out too." And Tia ends up being like, "What are you talking about?" "No, it doesn't." So then you hear Angel say, "This is kind of a stupid argument because that is really how she talks. Like, that's her accent." So then Stacey is like, "Girl, you don't sound like this 24/7. You married a man from Chicago and your voice ebbs and flows. It goes in and out." So then Tia is like, "Girl, yes, it slips in and out. Like, my children are American." I said, "Girl." Then she ends up saying, like, "You act like you're something that you're not. You're over here acting like going to so many different countries is a big deal." So they flash back to 8 months ago when Tia and Stacey sat down, and Stacey ends up saying like, "Oh, I've been to Nigeria." And Tia's like, "Well, why'd you go?" She was like, "Well, I like to travel. I've been to a lot of countries." And then Tia ends up being like, "You think that's an accomplishment?" And so Stacey's like, "So when did traveling around the world not become an accomplishment? Like, is that clearly, like, that's clearly something new to me?" And then Ashley ends up being like, "No, traveling around the world is still like an accomplishment." And so Stacey's like, "Thank you." And I'm like, "Ooh, Tia. Ooh, Tia." I said, "Girl, I do not want a diaspora war happening." But that also didn't help you, because I'm like, "Girl, do you not have," because let's call a thing a thing. Traveling, no matter what country you live in, is a flex. It's a clear flex, because everybody does not have the means in order to book a flight, make sure they get a nice hotel, because where you stay matters. Okay, the hotel matters, all right? Go to a nice country, spend at least 4 or 5 days there, like 5 days and 4 nights there, without putting themselves in financial debt. That is a flex, because then you think about it, like, you got to get your hair done, you got to get your fits, you got to have money to make sure you can enjoy yourself in another country and you can eat, go on different excursions. Like, Tia, that didn't land. That didn't land. And the people didn't like it. And I said, "Oh God, Tia, shut up. Shut up, because you're making it hard for yourself right now." So then they start talking about Stacey and the whole TJ of it all. They flash back to when Greg and Eddie were on the phone with TJ, and they do the whole bring Eddie out situation. We start talking about TJ. Like I said, Andy ends up saying, "Do you still stand by the fact that you did not pay this man?" And Stacey says, "I'm standing in my truth." Mind you, she's never said she never paid him. She's just always saying that that's not true. Honestly, I don't care. To be honest, TJ got on the internet saying he was going to produce receipts, and we ain't seen nothing, and I got over it real quick. If you ain't going to show me nothing, and the time frame is over now, because even if he comes out with receipts, I'm not going to care. I'm not going to care. And I'm not even going to try to play it in y'all's face and act like I care. I'm not going to care, because you should have came out when you said you was going to produce receipts, sir. But we continue on. So then Andy ends up asking Stacey, has Temu ever met TJ? And is TJ the reason why she got a divorce? And she's like, yes, he met him. And no, he's not the reason why I got a divorce. So then Andy ends up saying, who filed for divorce first? And Stacey lies and says she did, because when production shows us the information, it says that Temu is the plaintiff, meaning he filed first, and Stacey is the defendant. Mind you, I wonder if they were doing like some Drew Sidora Ralph situation where they were rushing to get to the courthouse. But I'm also looking at Temu kind of funny, because, sir, why would you file for divorce and then try to come back? I wouldn't want you if I was Stacey, because you went all the way and said you didn't want this no more. So if you don't want it no more, get away from me, sir. Go away from me with this. Okay? But she lies and said they filed first, or she filed first. I said, girl, you didn't have to lie about that. So then they start talking about the whole Timu situation with him not wanting to be around the group, specifically not around Wendy and Eddie. And Stacey basically says that the reason why he didn't want to go, or I didn't want to go to the triple date, is because I was still hurt, and he knows I was hurt about Wendy and Eddie being the messengers of such a painful moment. And so I didn't want to go to dinner. And she was like, and he really was not in town. So then when they flash back to them being at the pool with Tia and Timu saying, like, I won't be in town tomorrow. And then Stacey being like, well, yeah, he won't be back till next week. And then her getting caught up in a lie at the double date when Wendy and Eddie and Tia and Rob were there. It was a mess. And so Stacey says, I know it looks like a lot of word mumbo jumbo, but my husband travels twice a week and he was not in town. And she says, and this is where I think Tia, she got to get quicker, because Stacey controlled this argument, in my opinion, because she was the one that was like, if I invited you to meet my family and I said that he was uncomfortable, Tia, why then would you repeat the story to the people that I told you he was uncomfortable around? And it put Tia in the hot seat, because now Tia is like, well, trying to defend herself, being like, the straw that broke the camel's back for me, Stacey, is like, rather than you just owning that you got caught out and like caught in a lie, you basically try to make it seem like I was lying. And she said, the minute you got caught in a lie, you should have just owned it. So then Stacey ends up saying, girl, you didn't come to meet Timu or to get to know Arabella. You came there to gather information, to clock in so you could take it back to your master. Everybody said, master? Even Wendy said, whoa, whoa. And so Stacey's like, yeah, you brought that information so you could repeat it back to your master. All right. And then so Giselle's like, and your master is Wendy. And Wendy said, girl, I am nobody's master. Don't put that label on me, girl. So then Tia ends up saying, where we have like this cross, I guess, in between, is I was very uncomfortable because I had heard that you had gone and repeat what Monique told us to her husband, and it affected her family. So it flashes back to when Kiana basically says that Stacey ran back and told Chris Samuels the conversation they had during Pride and all of that stuff. And Tia ends up saying, I was like, how could someone like, look me in my face and lie like that? She's like, when I asked you, do you know Chris Samuels? You says you don't know that man and that you would never talk to him about his family. But when they do the flashback and Tia ends up asking Stacey about Chris Samuels, Stacey ends up saying, I only know him socially. And so then Tia's like, so you've never talked to him about his divorce? And Stacey's like, no, I only know him socially. But then when they flash back to Nevis, Stacey is saying that Timu and I saw other people, and one of the other people I saw was Chris Samuels. So Tia says that really bothered her, and she was just like, that was too much for her. And honestly, two things are true here. Stacey was lying, and she should have just been honest and more direct about not wanting to be around, Eddie and Wendy with Timu. And also that Timu wasn't comfortable with the cameras just yet, or with the group, because of the way that he sees them treating his ex-wife. She should have just said that and called it a day. But I also don't think she's wrong about Tia. Tia likes to feign like she's innocent, but she's not, girl. You definitely have been taking information and running it back to Giselle. And we saw you do it with the same situation with Angel in the whole eviction, not eviction situation. And then Giselle proved that y'all be talking poorly about Stacey when after the Reasonably Shady event, y'all were at Angel's house and Giselle says, we all bond talking shit about Stacey. So I truly believe that you probably did go there to gather information to run it back to Giselle. But Stacey shouldn't have lied. She should have just been honest. Continues on, and we have this question being posed towards Stacey, where the person is basically asking Stacey, or is pointing out the fact that Stacey seemed to be a lot more harsher towards Tia at her cannabis launch event, and instead of Ashley, and the person felt like Ashley was more disrespectful. And so Andy ends up asking Stacey, does she regret kicking Tia out of her event? And Stacey is like, no. And you could tell that kind of rubbed Tia the wrong way, because she was like, And I was like, well, girl, you just said that she married up and it's not an accomplishment to travel around the world. She was definitely going to stand on, no, I don't mind kicking you out. And my thing about it is, yes, I do feel like Ashley was more disrespectful than Tia, but I also feel like Stacey was at the point where she was like, girl, I can go back and forth with Ashley. Me and Ashley have known each other for at least a year and maybe prior to that. But also, girl, Ashley is a OG. You just got here. You not going to be talking to me like that. You're not going to be eating my deli sandwiches, my Pepsi, and my Lay's chips I'm giving you this spread of. This is not Subway. You can't have it your way. Okay? Be gone. A toodle-doo. Toodle-doo. And you had to go toodle-dooing, Tia. So they then start talking about the cannabis line and how Gizelle busted her out about potentially having one last season. And Stacey admits, she was like, I can admit that I had meetings around that time, but I did not have a line. So then Gizelle was like, well, why couldn't you just say that, Stacey? And Stacey was like, because Gizelle, I don't owe you that. And I was like, thank you. Because that's the thing about Gizelle that's annoying, is that Gizelle is always asking of people of things that she won't give to them. Like, you can't be asking for information and you don't give up information freely. Like, girl, be gone. Okay, so then they start arguing back and forth because Gizelle is like, so you didn't have a cannabis line? And Stacey's like, no, I did not have a cannabis line at the time that you were asking me. Like, absolutely not, Gizelle. And Gizelle is like, well, why didn't you just say that, Stacey? And Stacey, and this is my thing, Gizelle wants Stacey to be like, I was lying, guys. And my thing about it is, she's not gonna do that. I feel like Stacey should have just said, look, at that time, or like on the reunion stage last season, she should have been like, look, I've been taking business dealings. Some of them have been with people in the cannabis industry, but right now it's just, I'm inquiring information. Other than that, I don't have a line, and call it a day. But she should have been upfront about it, but also she don't really owe them that either. These people at that time are not her friends. The only person she seems to be cool with now is Wendy. So I wouldn't be telling them people my business, no way. I still think she should have been upfront about it. But again, Gizelle is not entitled to that information. Like, who the hell is Gizelle? So then you hear Angel say, I'm not sure why she cares. Talking about Gizelle, and I'm with Angel. Like, girl, why is it that big of a deal to you, lady? Like, you haven't been caught lying multiple times, Gizelle. Like, shut up. So then the conversation continues on with Andy ending up asking Wendy, like, what did you feel about her Stacey naming her business a Nigerian word? And Stacey's like, I was honoring my Nigerian heritage. And then you hear Tia say, Nigeria wants their word back. So Wendy ends up saying she feels like Stacey named her business that to get back at her and Eddie. And I would agree, because Stacey ends up saying that's interesting. So then Gizelle is like, you really think it's that deep for her? And then Wendy's like, no, I just think she's that smart. And that's the thing. Stacey is petty and smart, because there was no reason for her to name her business after a Nigerian word when Africa has a myriad of languages, of like different dialects and all of that stuff. She could have picked a different country, a different language. She did that to poke at Wendy and Eddie, and she poked on, okay? So then there's a question posed towards Kiana, Ashley, and Gizelle, where this person basically says, none of Stacey's alleged lies affect you guys. So why is this a big deal for y'all? Like, why isn't it an issue with y'all when she does do it? Or why do y'all take issue with her? So then you hear Wendy say under her breath, correct. And so then you see Stacey go ding, 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 ding. So then, Gizelle ends up saying, well, did you expect us not to like bring this information up? They're talking about TJ at this point. And Stacey says, I did not expect y'all to treat me the way that y'all did, especially being women who have been humiliated by the men that they have been with. Both of y'all, talking about Ashley and Gizelle. You heard Ashley say such a victim, or maybe that was Kiana, but then you end up hearing Gizelle say, stop it. But you hear Wendy being like, ooh, because she caught the whole humiliation piece of it. And then Gizelle ends up saying, well, you've been humiliated by TJ. Like, TJ was the one that humiliated you. And I'm like, well, Gizelle, you sat on the first row of every Sunday while your husband impregnated half the congregation, humiliating you to the point where it's alleged that you went to a mental institution, lady. That's the alleged thing about you. And then you have Ashley, who was with that wet, pasty demon of a man that was like 30-something years older than her, just wrinkly skin and all, just always looking wet, who climbed on top of her, impregnated her twice, and hasn't really given her anything. She don't have nothing to show for it, girl, other than a home in Alexandria. Woo! In a fell kangaroo hut. Humiliation. So I get what Stacey is saying. Y'all could have gave me more grace. And she not wrong. So the conversation continues on with Stacey basically saying, I expect you guys to have empathy for me. And so then Giselle was like, Stacey, what were we supposed to do when we were in LA? Someone showed us paperwork saying that you paid the man and you did not, like, were we not supposed to bring it to the show? Were we not supposed to bring it up? So then Kiana says her issue is that Stacey was just not truthful. And so then you have Tia jumping in saying, well, Stacey, you can't be the victim all the time. Like, everyone's telling you that there's an issue with your behavior. You have to realize that there's an issue with your behavior. So Stacey basically says she's going to try her best to be more direct and clear with everybody and start beating around the bush. Ashley ends up saying you're going to be more truthful instead of dishonest. But I'm also looking at Ashley like, girl, when were you the truth teller of this group? Okay. So then Stacey says, well, hopefully if I'm here next season, I'll be able to move forward with the ladies. Because Andy ends up asking her, like, or telling her, it looks like she has a lot of work to do with this group. And she says, hopefully if I'm back, I'll be able to do it. And so Wendy's like, fingers crossed. And then Stacey's like, fingers crossed. And they both giggle because everyone knows Stacey is coming back. So then Andy gives Stacey a warning where he's like, you know, a lot of people get big heads when it comes to like all the fan praise. Do you think that's going to be a problem for you? And Stacey is like, no, girl, I'm good. I said, okay. So the reunion continues on, and this time it's about Angel. They run Angel's package, and then we settle in back onto the stage. Andy ends up asking Angel, so where are you living now? Angel lets it be known her and Bobby are still going back and forth from Denver to Potomac, but they have purchased a Potomac home. She's excited because the same designer that designed the house in Colorado will be doing the same in Potomac. I would be interested to see the different aesthetics if the designer adheres to the same aesthetic that they had in Colorado, or if they're going to switch it up in Potomac. I hope they do. It was a little too dark in that house for me. I said, y'all either need more windows or we need to liven up these colors. But the conversation continues with Ashley asking Angel, well, does it have 30 acres? And Angel being like, no, but it does have acres. And if you lived in the Potomac area, you would know that, Ashley. And Ashley's like, well, I chose to live in Alexandria. I didn't choose. And I said, no, you had to live in Alexandria because if I remember, you only got that house because of Michael, because Michael signed on to help you get that house because you did not have the actual money to obtain the house by yourself. So it doesn't really seem like it was a choice because the only way you were going to be able to get that house is if Michael signed off on it, because he only signed off on it because it was like 20 minutes down the street from his apartment. Don't act like you had the funds to be where you really wanted to be, ma'am. And granted, you might not even want to live in Potomac, but don't act like it was really that great of a choice when you didn't have the money to do that yourself. So the conversation continues on because Angel ends up saying, sure, Ashley. And I said, yeah, that's what you should have said, girl. So then I think it was Andy ends up asking Angel, well, did Tia help you get the house? And Angel was like, no. And Tia was like, well, no, I didn't come on the show to get clients. I came on the show to make friends. So then Giselle was like, well, no, you came on the show to make friends. She didn't come on the show to make friends. So then they started running the footage for like when they were saying that Angel was getting evicted, and Angel being like, girl, I came to Potomac to be friends with Wendy, Giselle, and Ashley. Girl, that's beyond me. So then Angel ends up saying, I wasn't the one that was constantly having kiki corners and talking poorly about me, and this whole eviction thing happened. You clearly see Giselle, Wendy, and Ashley like talking trash about me at every chance that they got. And so then Angel ends up saying it was like constant whiplash being in the group. Like 1 minute she felt like she belonged, the next minute she felt like she didn't belong. But what I will say is, Angel, you did that to yourself. Now, I'm not going to say that like Giselle giving you a hard time was your fault. It wasn't, or Ashley. But I will say that you had opportunities to branch out, but because you're so like loyal to Kiana, who by the way speaks to you crazy. Okay, because we're going to talk about that. You messed up an opportunity to make friends with people. Like Stacey said and told us, and you even confirmed it, that she reached out to you to see how you were acclimating to the group, and you gave her a dry response. You were hell bent on making Wendy the villain, when honestly, if you would have let things go, I think Wendy would have warmed up and to you, and you guys would have maybe formed a relationship. I think if Angel was on this show without Kiarna, I don't think she would have had such a hard time, because I'm like, you were too committed to being loyal to Kiarna, because I feel like the only reason why you didn't want to be cool with Stacey and Wendy is because Kiarna had beef with them. And you wanted to be so close to Giselle, but I'm like, Giselle kept disrespecting you, but I think that Angel kept holding out hope because Kiarna was close with Giselle and Ashley, that she was hoping eventually they would warm up to her. Because I have not forgotten how you had no problem hosting these women talking trash about Stacey after the Reasonably Shady event, Angel, at your house. So, like, yeah, you belong when you talking trash about somebody and you're not the target. But when you are the target, all of a sudden you don't belong. You did that to yourself. I like, not all of it, but partly that's your fault, girl. So then while they're sitting there, Wendy ends up bringing up, girl, why haven't you checked Tia? Because Tia was also a part of these things too. It wasn't just Giselle. And so Tia ends up saying, well, yeah, you know, I apologized to her. She was very upset with me. So then Angel ends up saying her and Tia did speak about the whole eviction thing, because she was just like, yeah, like, I was upset that she told Giselle, because she was like, if I wanted Giselle to know, I would have told Giselle. I would have told Giselle. It seemed like Andy kept cutting Angel off, but I also feel like Angel is long-winded like myself, and she was like, struggling trying to get to the point, but she made her point. And I do feel like it is kind of crazy that Angel kept giving Tia a pass when I feel like Tia was blatantly stirring the pot in a way, because, girl, Tia should not have told Giselle about helping you pack, specifically because Tia knew that Giselle was giving you a hard time. So that should have told you how much she cares about that relationship you and her have, because she couldn't even lie to Giselle and not tell her about what you was going through. So then a viewer's question was posed towards Angel about her having the hottest RHOP husband. I don't think he's that hot. I think Bobby is attractive. He definitely has the build that I would be into, but I do think Eddie is cuter, because when Andy ends up asking the stage, like, do you agree? Wendy was like, girl, no, I think Eddie, my chocolate man, is fine. And then Stacey ends up saying, well, you know, I like white chocolate from Deutschland. So then they end up asking Andy, what does he like? And he says, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. Everyone starts screaming and laughing and all of this stuff. Now, I did see a split in opinion. Some people felt like it was kind of funny, cringy, and then other people felt like they were grossed out or cringed out by it because they felt like it was fetishization of black men. I will say I saw a lot more gay black men say that, but they do have experience with white gay men fetishizing them. So I can understand them taking it that way. I just thought it was a cringy moment, but I totally understand if people were uncomfortable or like, keep that to yourself, or grossed out, especially with him using the phrase, the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. It was like, you getting too comfortable around here, okay? But the conversation continues on, and they start talking about Kiarna and Angel's relationship and how they've been friends for almost 20 years and, you know, all of that stuff. So as they're sitting there, Andy ends up saying, well, Angel, it seems like your energy shifted from going shopping to Preakness. And so Angel ends up saying, well, I thought in that moment after the whole chin check situation, like, is this worth me and her having an argument about? And then I was just like, it's not worth it. So then Wendy chimes in and she was like, well, do you understand like how I would feel that way? And so Kiarna jumps in and she's like, well, let me say something before Wendy says something. But you do see Angel kind of nod her head like, yes, like, I can see how you felt that way, Wendy. Okay. And so then they start going back and forth. And then as Wendy is trying to have a conversation with Angel, Kiarna is cutting Angel off, and Angel is allowing Kiarna to do it because they're looking at each other, and Angel is like, you know what? Oh, I'm sorry. You can go ahead. And then Wendy's like, no, girl, you can talk. Angel, me and you are having a conversation. And I'm like, yes, Angel, keep talking. And then Angel was like, well, no, she can talk. And then I finished. And then Wendy's like, no, go ahead, babe. Like, Angel, speak up. And so Kiarna's like, well, I'm talking now, so she can speak after. And I was like, ooh, girl, that was nasty. And I'm looking at Angel like, you're a fully grown ass adult. You are married. You popped out 2 human beings from your coochie. Why are you letting this lady talk to you like this? Friend or not? Like, you were having a conversation with Wendy. The conversation is about your energy towards Wendy and about your energy switching up. Why are you letting Kiana like cut you off? And why does Kiana can't regulate her emotions and just be quiet for a moment, and then once things die down, jump into the conversation? I said, ooh, girl, you're rude. You're rude, Kiana. Get that together. All right. So then Wendy ends up saying, like, what type of relationship is this? Like, why is she speaking to her like that? And you could tell that everybody was kind of like caught off guard. Cause even Giselle was like, like, cause it wasn't cute. And Stacey and Ashley were looking at them like, girl, you gonna let her talk to you like that? So I think Kiana ends up saying, before we get like all over the place, I just want to say this. And so she ends up apologizing to Angel about the way that she came at her and was like, I shouldn't have done that. So I just want to apologize to you. And I was like, well, if you were going to apologize to her, why couldn't you wait until she said what she needed to say? It just feels like you're trying to apologize, because everybody, when that moment went down, was like, that was nasty of you to do that in front of all those people. Like, you son somebody that's supposedly supposed to be your best friend. Okay. So then as the conversation continued on, Angel ends up saying, we talked about it extensively. And she was like, I could see where my energy has changed and was different. And so I can acknowledge that. And so Wendy says, thank you for acknowledging that. So then Andy ends up asking Giselle about the whole catfish of it all. Giselle basically ends up saying that, like, she already knew who Tia was because she was introducing Tia to the group, but she didn't know who Angel was. And she said one of the blog pages posted a picture of both of them. And she was like, why haven't I seen this person yet? And production was like, well, stop being funny, Giselle. That's Angel. And Angel's like, oh, okay, Giselle. Okay, like, you're being shady. And Giselle was like, well, I wasn't trying to be shady. So then I think Andy ends up asking, like, who here uses Facetune? And Kiana was like, we all do. And so Stacey was like, girl, I even Facetune my dog. I said, girl, why are you Facetuning the dog, Stacey? Stacey, and so Giselle ends up saying, we all use filters, but she says in Nevis, she wasn't trying to be shady. And so then Wendy jumps in and she's like, can we all agree she's the one that said the catfish comment? You're the one that said it. And Giselle's like, yes. And Giselle said, I said it. I wasn't trying to be shady, which is a lie, because, girl, you definitely was trying to be shady. She goes on to say, like, it's kind of weird because we talked about it. We laughed about it. I didn't think it was going to be a moment. The next morning, we had a moment. And then throughout the year, you continue, not the year, but throughout the season, you continuously brought it up. But I was like, girl, that's not fair to Angel. And y'all know, because I don't see it for Angel, that y'all were picking at her with that. Like, y'all were saying catfish. Also, Angel wouldn't let it go. So it was like equal. She couldn't let it go because it really did hurt her feelings and she didn't think she got a genuine apology. But also, y'all were using it to pick at her. So the conversation continues on with Angel basically saying that she felt like she was getting hazed by Giselle. Giselle ends up saying that's not what was happening. But I will give Angel this. Like, I can understand why she felt like she was getting hazed, because it went from catfish to she was somewhat cool with the group by joining in on dogpiling on Stacey. And then it shifted to her being back on, like, being, in her mind, hazed with the whole eviction thing. And she really didn't have any other connections in the group other than Kiana and slightly Tia and Jassi. But Jassi and Kiana and Tia hold no power in this group. So she probably felt like she didn't really have people on her side. Because Giselle ends up with Giselle is, girl, you're like a dog with a bone. You don't let go. Like, if you would have eased up on her, maybe she wouldn't feel that way. She wouldn't feel that way. So then they start talking about the catfish thing, specifically what happened in Nevis, where she was like, all I heard was ha 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 catfish. They flashback. Wendy is laughing, but everybody, for the most part, like, Stacey was laughing at that table, and so was Ashley. I think Jassi didn't laugh, and neither did Tia or Kiana, but Stacey, Wendy, and Ashley were laughing. So as they're sitting there, Wendy ends up saying, well, yeah, like, I laughed. I'll admit that, like, I laughed, but she was like, you kept trying to blame everything on me when the person sitting beside me was the one that was talking poorly about you. You saw Giselle as a big sister, but you didn't have any smoke for her, even though she was the one disrespecting you to your face. And I will give Wendy this. She was like, even when people looked you in your face and told you that they did it, you still redirected your energy towards me. And I say, yeah, Angel. And that's why some people felt like you might be a colorist on the low, because the biracial and the light skin were playing in your face, and you did not give them any work. Low key, it took you forever to start piping up at Giselle, which is wild to me because Giselle was the one that disrespected you first. She started the ball rolling with this catfish situation. So then when they flash back to the Reasonably Shady, you have, again, Angel blaming Wendy for the catfish conversation, even though Giselle tells her, girl, it's me. Like, I'm the one that said it. So then Angel ends up saying, she had energy based off of her interactions. And she says some of her interactions, she had a little too much dip on her chip. Okay. And Wendy says, okay, girl, I see that. I'll take that for right now. So then someone ends up asking Angel, like, can you explain to us, like, what you meant when you referred to Wendy as asshole lips and Forrest Whitaker eyes? And you have everyone being like, ooh, girl. And so Wendy's like, yeah, please explain that to me. Like, explain it to us, okay? So they flash back to her and her sister talking about Wendy. And what's her name? Angel ends up saying that was harsh. Like, she was like, I could tell that was hard. But she blamed that on Wendy's facial expressions. I guess she says when Wendy makes her eyes a certain kind of way, it reminds her of Forrest Whitaker. Especially when Wendy is like skeptical of something, she kind of like closes her eyes and does all of this. And so Wendy ends up saying like, okay, my facial expressions, but I would be wrong if I called you James Earl Jones. I said, oh, girl, not James Earl Jones. And someone did a side-by-side. I say, y'all are sick. And Andy's like, not James Earl Jones. Stacey took me out saying, God rest his soul. So then Angel kind of is like, okay, I can say that was below the belt and that's not my character. Like, I shouldn't have said that. But I'm like, Angel, that is your character. That's why you said it. So then there's a question posed to Kiarna and Angel about them being called sadness and madness. Honestly, that is what they give. Kiarna gets irritated too quickly, and she's not quick with like her responses to things. So it's just like your anger is serving no purpose. And Angel does give Eeyore vibes. Like, girl, you do get, like, it gives melancholy. All right. Angel says she feels like that's not the case with her. Like, she actually feels like, she's fun. But Kiarna ends up saying she can see what the viewers can see, that there were moments where she was very angry or a little bit upset. But she also says that it's not true that her and Angel are on an island by themselves. She enjoys 85% of the cast. And then they flash to Wendy and Stacey because we know she don't like them. So then they start talking about the whole catfish situation of Ashley bringing catfish to the Potomac and Ponies event. Ashley says, if someone called me catfish, I wouldn't be that upset. Like, who cares? And then I think this is when Angel ends up saying, well, girl, you did it to be nasty and petty. It wasn't to be fun. And Ashley's like, well, girl, just lighten up. Like, take a joke. You need to learn to take a joke. And Angel says, no, I don't need to do that. Like, you should be embarrassed by the things that you do on this show. And what I will say is, on one hand, I see what Ashley is saying. I do think Angel needs to lighten up if she's going to be on this show. Real Housewives of any franchise is unserious to a degree. It's dramatic, it's unhinged, it's cutthroat, it's ruthless, it's funny, it's campy, it's unserious. At some point, you need to learn how to not take yourself so seriously. And I feel like Angel is acting like Monique when we first met her, giving us this presentation. But the issue is, I don't really think she's being herself. I do understand that Angel wants to be this zen lady, but you can be zen and also cuss people out. And I'm like, girl, they're waiting for you to cuss them out. I think that's what Angel doesn't understand, is that they're testing her to see how far they can push it with her. And right now they're pushing it hard with her because she's not fighting back. And I'm like, all that energy Angel has on threads, in her interviews, and in her confessionals, why can she not bring this like in person? It's weird to me. So then the conversation shifts to Andy telling Ashley, now look, girl, I got a stack of cards for you. And a lot of people are saying that like you are very messy this season. And it's like, you know, normally people love your messiness, but this year it felt different. It felt mean and nasty at times. And Ashley is kind of looking at like, girl, state your sources. Like, where have I been? Like, who have I been downright nasty to? Like, who have I been mean spirited to? And Ashley is like, not Ashley, Angel is like, girl, to me, to Stacey, to Wendy, when filming went down and they flash back to when Ashley says Zim Win is in the pen, and they're like, yeah, girl, you did say that. You did say that. And Ashley was like, well, I've already apologized to Wendy. But then she ends up saying like, well, when I saw the mug shot, I didn't think it was real. Like, I thought like she was laughing. I thought she thought it was a joke. Like, I didn't think it was real, Wendy. So then Wendy ends up saying like, I didn't make fun of nobody, because Ashley ends up saying, well, Wendy has made fun of people when they're at their lowest. And she was like, no, I haven't. She was like, I didn't even make fun of Karen when Karen was in jail. So let's not do that. She was like, I would believe you, Ashley, if I didn't find out that you have a vendetta against me. And Ashley's like, okay, let's talk about this vendetta that I have against you. And so then Ashley ends up saying, since you got on this show, you acted in a way where you thought you were better than everybody else and that you were the best person in the room. And so they flash back when Wendy is yelling at Ashley saying, like, I have 4 degrees, I'm not stupid. But I'm like, y'all should play what caused her to say that, because Ashley was trying to act like Wendy didn't have any credibility and that she was dumb, and she called her stupid. So her response was like, girl, I have 4 degrees. I'm not stupid. Like, let's not play those games. So then Wendy says, how you view yourself has nothing to do with me and everything to do with you. Everything to do with you, girl. So, like, Ashley ends up saying, I would not use my accomplishments. I don't vilify my accomplishments. I said, I don't think that's the word that Ashley was looking for, because that means you're demeaning your accomplishments. I think she meant to say, I'm not boasting or bragging about my accomplishments. And so then Wendy ends up saying, because you don't have none. I said, and she don't. And she don't. All Ashley got... Let's break this down. What does Ashley really have when you think about this platform? Like, she has that tired ass business with Giselle, which we don't know what it is. It's giving money laundering scheme at this point, okay? She had that failed kangaroo hut with Gollum. Then, you know, that's about it. I mean, some people see having children as an accomplishment, so I guess. But if you don't see that as something, Ashley doesn't really have anything to her name. No brand deals. I have not seen her on nobody's TV show. What's that new black soap opera, Beyond the Gates? At least Karen, Wendy, and Giselle were on that show. I ain't seen Ashley on that show. What does Ashley do on her off time? What other thing? Like, Ashley really doesn't have any accomplishments. And if we're going to keep it a stack and keep it real, if Ashley did have accomplishments, she would be throwing them in people's faces. But she don't have nothing. So then Ashley's response to that is like, girl, bullshit, bitch. Like, are you serious? And that's how you know Ashley doesn't have anything, because you didn't have anything to throw back in her face. Because my response would have been like, girl, I do. I have this degree. I have this successful business. You don't have nothing. So then Ashley responds back to her by saying, well, at least I have one social security number. And everyone's like... And I was like, that didn't even hit for me. It did not hit for me, because the lady's not being charged with identity fraud. She's being charged with insurance fraud. You can't even read? Girl, get rid of Ashley, because I'm sick of her. But yeah, y'all, that is it. That is all. As always, remember to be brutally authentic. Definitely hop down in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, and I'm out, y'all. Deuce.